Okay, remember that they're changing my voice. Before I talk about live oak, I'd like to point out that the water that I use to kind of, you know, brush my teeth, what have you, has been drugged to some degree. I don't use the water at my house because the water from the well isn't that pure, and it probably also causes me to have issues if I use it. And so I've bought several different types of water, and it's also part of why I don't buy water in big packages from the store. I buy it individually, which is kind of embarrassing, right? So I buy, say 6 individual bottles, and it costs me like $15 when I could have bought a lot more water in a bigger bottle or in a package for a lot less. But, it's a small price to pay to be persecuted for righteousness' sake, what have you, and to bring glory to God. So let's talk about live oak and how it's connected to Marissa. So Marissa, with the wordplay, there's lots of connections here. I'm trying to get to the key stuff here. Part of the wordplay is I'm Alpha's race, right? The letter I, the letter M, the A, then an S, then R, A, S. And the word race can be said as R, A, S, not just R, A, C, E. Okay, so it's all I'm Alpha race, I'm Alpha Raws, I'm Alpha raise, how they want to raise people, and it connects to people molesting children and stuff like that because it's a lot easier than you might think to create cultures that don't allow for child molestation. That's the expected output when you do things a certain way, right? The expected output of the cultures you see is a certain degree of child molestation, the expected output of the economy, the philosophies, okay? The way people relate to each other. It all comes together in a certain way. The vast majority of child molesters, I would go as far as to say, are not people who are born child molesters. They are created, they are turned into child molesters because of the exact way and ways that society does things. Okay, so let's talk about live oak here. Matter of fact, let me do this another clip. Let me roll down the window, and they're probably going to film me from the outside because, this doesn't feel right here. Okay, so really quickly, keep in mind that they have technology to make it so that other people drink the water from the store and they don't notice anything, and then I notice it. So I've seen it where somebody said that there was nothing wrong with the drink way later on. Okay, and I've had an experiment with a female who acknowledged there was something wrong with it. So they do it both ways. I've had it where they've drugged the drink so other people can detect it for whatever reason, and I've had it where other people aren't having the same problem that I'm having when I drink it, and there perhaps were some gang stalkers who were lying about, they were lying and saying that there was nothing wrong with it when there actually was something wrong with it. And I know for sure that they drug things, okay. Keep in mind, I used to drink, I used to smoke weed. People like me are very familiar with different states of mind and so on and so forth. Okay, so let's talk about Live Oak now. So when I went to Live Oak, it was probably about 97, 98. Okay, I went there as a sophomore, and I left, I believe, early in my junior year. So I left probably right when I turned 17, or right before I turned 17 or something. No, I think it was a little shortly after I turned 17. And since I was working out the whole time, doing martial arts intensely, by the time I was like 17 and a half or so, I was really intense. And I took a very important and significant picture that they've altered since then. They went as far as to go into my house with my parents' permission and to switch out the pictures. It's just like you see with the stuff on YouTube where they change the way Martin Luther King looks, Tupac, you name it, except for they went as far as to change the pictures in my house, and I'm sure that everyone with sense believes me, so I'm not going to elaborate on that more and why they would do that and so on and so forth. Okay, so Live Oak, right? So when I first went there, I didn't know anybody, right? And I was sort of shy, and I was eventually, my brother knew several people there over time at least. I think he didn't know Paul when I was going to Live Oak, but maybe he did. But he knew Alex. And Alex kind of at some point, before I started hanging out with, the black guys, thugs, what have you, he went to various groups with me, right? and this wasn't the only person that did this. Also, a Hispanic gentleman, a Mexican named Omar, who I was friends with at the time, he also brought me to different groups, right? So they showed me firsthand that I wasn't welcome in these different groups. And when I started taking martial arts, there was one cowboy gentleman. There's probably about 70 cowboys or so that went to the school, cowboys and cowgirls. And at some point he comes up to me and says, you can hang out with us and so on and so forth. And because I was having problems with some people in the group that I was in, right? And he was told by the martial art teacher or so to do so, and he did so in a pretty sincere manner. And he was a pretty cool guy, right? I don't know exactly how he feels about the situation, but that was my impression of it. So anyway, yeah, so we went around to the different white groups, right? Except for the cowboys, right? Maybe 3, 4 different white groups, and there was more than that. And in one or two of them, he said, these guys are cool. You can come out. You can come here without me. And he starts talking to someone else. I think it happened that way in both cases here. And I remember these kind of skinny, sort of skaterish white guys. They're considered cool for white guys or something, and they're looking at me like they're shocked, like they couldn't believe their eyes, like this is segregation, and I'm hanging out, and then some white guys brought me there, like it's all good. Now, Alex, I think the simple answer is he was the coolest white guy in the school. He wore expensive clothes. He was like a rich kid, but he didn't come off as a popular. He hung out with thugs and to some degree, and just kind of cool guys from different cultures. And so it was interesting to me to see them respond to him. It's like they're trying to downplay his social status among them to some degree, not because of me, just because they're trying to be cool and whatever reasons they have. And then they had to kind of think about what to do there. But they were tripping that I was there, right? And this one guy, he says to him, you don't believe me that you can come? Yeah, he said, no, yeah. And so this guy kind of was like, huh? Oh, yeah, I mean, so yeah, well, yeah, or something like that, right? So you could tell that he was like thrown off by it, right? He didn't want to agree, but he didn't want to kind of BS. Now, this is where it gets very important here. A lot of the communication here has to do with the occult communication, right? Why was Marissa killed? Because of the occult, because of Satanism, because of the governing class, right? Because of sexual sadism, because of the role-playing game, right? The wordplay and the word magic. I'm Cage, right? And M geek, right? GIC can have the sound geek. M G ice, right? G the earth deity of Rome. G the G in Freemasonry, right? There's a lot of connection there. Slave, right? Lay, see, down, right? The V can represent an arrow pointing down. So who do you have sex with, right? So lay down, right? The ease, the ES can be ease, the ease of the lay down. So they're a slave because they're dating the way the governing class wants them to, with an emphasis on sex and reproduction and saying, this person's such and such, some female saying that they're the wife of somebody and how that plays out and how it affects the environment and the psychology and so on and so forth, and the spirit. So there was the spirit, this occult spirit in the air. The devil was there, their individual evil spirits were there, and it was telling me, it doesn't want me around. But I'm like a mightier warrior than they are, right? But they're like, there was like maybe 15 of them, 16, 17 of them. So they're kind of grouped together, and they knew that there was danger associated with saying, what the fuck you doing here? Okay, it's like they wanted to say that, but they knew that in the long term it would be bad for them. Okay, because at the end of the day, even though the school is mostly white, white people, they fear gangsters. Okay, they fear gang members historically in public schools in California. For those of you who are white, think it shouldn't be said. Think about it this way, that's the reason why, and I don't approve of it, mind you, that a bunch of white skinheads started to recruit heavily in the public school system, because they were saying, stick up for yourself. And you see that in the movie American History X, right, where there's a white kid who's not sticking up to the black Crips in the movie, and these white guys are like, stick up to him, and it's a huge part of that movie, how skinheads relate to the white community in Los Angeles, where in Orange County at one point at least they had the highest concentration of skinheads in America. That's in the same state in California. And so there's similarities between the white skaters in Morgan Hill by San Jose and the white skaters in Southern California, and there's similarities between San Jose and Los Angeles, right? There's a sort of California theme. There's similarities. There's distinct differences, and there's similarities and commonalities. So, you know, they knew that if they pushed me too far, if they disrespect me, so one of them flat out said, it's nothing against you. We just like things here a certain way. So here's this contradiction, right? Remember, Set is a deity of confusion. In the air is confusion. They're confused. I'm confused. The only reason Alex is not confused, he's so busy being an entitled person who thinks of himself as so much cooler than everyone else or something, that he's not like, oh, these guys aren't cool with that. He's like, whatever, man. They know you're with me. You're good, right? But they didn't see it that way. They kind of saw it that way, but they did not see it that way. Okay, so now let me try to help you understand again. If you watch, if you see the old pictures of lynchings and you see the kind of white way that they have about them, right? The people in the crowd who are lynching, they're standing by, someone who's hung, right? Black person, what have you. And they have a certain kind of occult, indifferent, vicious way about them. However, that isn't exactly the situation there, right? To some degree, they're just a bitter, irritated white kid who's somebody's son. They're not all, but that is there in them, right? It's the 90s, right? And the 90s isn't that far away from the 50s and 60s and 70s. So that's definitely there in them, that in that kind of form. So I also saw it when I was on Tiny Chat, right? It's called that, but a lot of adult people go there. There's one group called High Ideas, right? High Ideas. And I think it's also a play on the words for high DEAs, right? The drug enforcement agencies, right? Because they had people showing their marijuana crops and they're smoking weed on camera and so on and so forth. So I'm there, and to some degree, I wasn't welcome there. But because I liked being on camera with a bunch of people at the same time, because a few people there were cool with me, because there's a few chicks there that I had a lightweight crush on or something, I would go there, right? And so some were like, let them stay. And some people like, I can, because they had the option to boot me from that room if they wanted to, and they didn't, right? So, and there was some kind of hostility there. And so the kind of look they had was similar to the look in the kids, and it's similar to the look in the lynchings. And I would say it's more like the look in the lynchings than you'd expect the look in a skinhead group, because it's more like a mainstream kind of irritation, Satanism, what have you. Now, so how does this connect to Marissa Di Napoli? Now, remember, I did not know whether Maria Mello, who was the female who broke my heart in that very same school, was Italian or Colombian or Mexican or whatever, Peruvian, I don't know. And same with Marissa Di Napoli. I assumed she was Mexican first, seen the last name, said maybe she's Italian, don't know. And it turns out that she was adopted. Maybe her adopted family are Italians, maybe they're Italian Jews, I don't know. But there's that same confusion, right? And it also has to do with those spirits in the air. There's a spirit in the air with the various Mexican and, Hispanic groups. And there's a spirits in the air, there's spirits and sub-spirits with the white groups. And there's some kind of common kind of everyone should go in their own place spirit. Okay? Being someone who's biracial, but first and foremost someone who is fair. It didn't sit well with me that it was racially segregated. In fact, when I went to, on a fluke, I ended up in Santa Cruz County, got the charges thrown out, what have you, or at least removed from my record. Okay? It's like, I had forgotten everything I saw in the movies, everything I heard in the streets. I didn't understand why people were racially segregating. For whatever reason, it slipped my mind. Maybe it was mind control. Maybe they were covertly drugging me. They were doing something like that. And I was like, man, what the fuck is everyone's problem? And so there was this, I told this story in my story playlist. Let me really briefly touch it. There was 3 tables for the Hispanics, and there was only a few more of them than the blacks. And there was 2 tables for the blacks. And I think the whites either had 1 table or they just ate in their cell. There's only like 3 or 4 of them. And so every black person was acting hostile when I first got there, trying to be a badass. They didn't understand who they're fucking with. They were told to give me a hard time, whatever the reason, right? And so I end up sitting with the Hispanics for a second. And everyone has like a cow. The black guys are like, look, don't expect us to back you up, da-da-da-da-da. Hispanics, they start acting funny. The guy who's at the control table, whatever the fuck, he sounds an alarm. First he points to me and goes over there. I'm like, man, fuck you. You know what I'm saying? What the fuck? This white cop's going to, feed into it too. I said, fuck that, right? And so he sounds an alarm. And so the cops start coming. And you can kind of lightweight hear him through the thing if I remember correctly. And they said something, if I remember correctly, they said something like, oh, he just sat over there, da-da-da-da-da. He said, oh, that's no big deal. They'll handle that or whatever. Okay, because he had sounded the potential riot alarm or whatever, emergency alarm, whatever that alarm is. And so this was a recurring theme. And you see that RAS, that race application of the wordplay, that's very significant. In fact, RAM and race, quite often the wordplay, you see the letters come together. Like when you look at the word Ebo and the word Israel, you remove the I's and you take the B-O and you get Obi from the B-O, okay? B-O, the over reproductive cycle, and Israel, right? The I, then you get the S real, the reals. The reals is the Obi, right? So it comes together like that. And so it is with a lot of other words. I forgot the word I was thinking of at this time, but so it is with the other wordplay there as well. And of course they say some immature bitch shit because they're on some clown. Think about Crowley and Dick Dastardly, some immature frat-faced punks. You see these guys with their smirks in the news. Hate to get on Jeff Bezos all the time, but Bezos is a very common smirk that you see, very insincere look. You see it, with these various guys out there with these weird faces, a weird kind of black-face mockery, a weird kind of, mad TV, bitch face, nerd face, geek face, sarcastic, malicious face, whatever that is. So again, it goes back to hostility, and the word host is in hostility. So who's hosting that, right? Why is it like that? Because whites, Jews, and LGBT people in the upper class want it that way. The host and the hostility are connected. That's also why it's important to note that if you're in the host spirit, that you're in the spirit of the devil. Because Satan in the Bible said to be the god of this world, leads his people astray, and you have to transcend this world, don't love the world, anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, love for the Father is not in them. Okay, so that Satanism was coming from the elite. And so to some degree, these people are thrown off because it's not starting with them and they don't know entirely what to think of it. But because they're social norm fanatics, they're more like an animal than I am. Okay, so they're quicker to kind of do what a sheep would do, a herd animal, pack animal. Okay, and I'm quicker to kind of say, what's fair? There's that clash there. Now, I wasn't like, hey, I want to hang out with you guys. Hey, if you don't want me around, I'm out of here. You don't got to tell me twice. Like, fuck that shit. You see what I'm saying? And treat me bad. I'm not sticking around for that bullshit. Same thing with this planet. Okay? They don't get right very soon. I'm out this motherfucker one way or another, right? And I'm not saying I'm going to kill myself or something, but one way or another, I'm out this motherfucker. You see what I'm saying? That's fucking bullshit. I'm Jesus. I'm the way. God gave you a chance to, and they're making demands of me and shit. They're like, hey, you have to fall in line. You have to uphold art. And they're saying all kinds of bitch ass shit. And that's the story. Matter of fact, let me end this by saying that because I kind of said everything I wanted to say about Live Oak. Other things happened there. This one guy was like an Italian kid or some said, stay away from Maria. Here you are telling Jesus to stay away from Maria. And again, it has to do with that social relations because there's people who want to say, well, he's Italian or, he's white or, this is our country or whatever the fuck. There's all kinds of dickheads who want to say all kinds of bitch ass shit. But at the end of the day, when you're younger and you're really a gangster, you don't give a fuck who someone is. They could be the president. So they could be the richest person. Say, I'm the mayor. I don't give a fuck about that. I'm a fucking Crip would be my response at the time. So I didn't give a fuck about none of that. And some gangsters do and some gangsters don't. You see what I'm saying? But I'm not a gangster. But that's how I felt at that time. You see what I'm saying? At that time. And then right now someone just like turn on their engine like, I'm not, like I said, I'm not a gangster. Say it again, right? I'm just telling a story, right? Well, this guy, I don't know if you can hear he's an older white guy, older white gentleman in a pickup truck, right? So I'm not, Anyway, yeah, and that goes back to those misconceptions that are forged. Just me saying that might have forged the misconception in his mind. That guy's a Crip, and I've seen him act up this one time, but I'm not a gangster, right? At that time, I identified as a gangster. I've gone over that in my story. I don't like going over that topic. It's annoying. Well, maybe not annoying. It's awkward. It feels weird. I don't like that I identified as that, but again, the word scripture is a play on words for Crip's root. They expected me to go that path. And it also has to do with the story. Let me, oh man, I forgot what I was going to say. Man, because they're fuming me. Let me just end it here instead here where, when they had communicated to me in the various Hispanic and white groups, which make up most of school, and it wasn't even an Asian group I can think of, right? They had communicated that I should be somewhere else, right? And where does that kind of default when the two black guys who saw themselves as Crips, and to some degree were, right? The thug life connection is a complicated explanation whether thug life is Crip. The simple answer is thug life. Some are lean toward Crips, some are Crips, and some are Crips. Tupac infamously said that he doesn't care if you're blood or cuz, as long as you got love for thugs, and saying he's thug life and they're all strapped and has to do with that, okay? So, and some of these guys had said, they got in some conflict with some Hispanic gang and they came back with the strap and those guys didn't want any problems and so on and so forth. So, and again, I'm not racist, just keeping it factual. Because when I read stories that, people used to hang out with gangs, I wonder how true it is. I said, I'm never going to lie about things. Why lie? Especially if it doesn't incriminate anybody, so people can't say anything. And if it's the type of thing that it's more important to tell the truth about than to worry about incriminating people, then I'm going to go ahead and tell the truth. You see what I'm saying? Because I put God first, not some code of the streets or trying to be cool or trying to make sure everyone doesn't call me this, that, and the other thing. But anyway, so when they had put that spirit out there, it marshaled me toward the bitter black thugs, which was basically like the only black group. There was like 3 or so other black guys. One was hung out with the football players. One dressed up like a cowboy. I guess he was trying to make a statement or something. And one was like a poor guy from the village or something. So the rest of us hung out together in a school, about 2,000. There maybe was like 10, 12 of us. There wasn't that many of us, but we held it down because everyone else there knew basically that we would kill them if it ever came down to it, right? That we would, scrap with them in the school, and they probably outnumbered. They might even win, but they would be held to pay because, these days it's a bit confused, but in the 90s in Northern California, basically the Crips were the bell that rings the loudest. Basically, it's not entirely that simple, but basically. Okay, so there's Oakland and there's other things out there, but everyone knows, it's like in the SIBO song. It says, it don't matter who start the funk when you're riding with the deuce. We just handle that. And again, they mess up my ability to rap. They put an emphasis on that. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of say it. He said, we just handle that shit like the lokes that we is. Again, I'm not a gangster. I'm promoting it being gangster. He says, hit them niggas quick. Fuck the bitches and the kids. Split wigs. Watch graves get digged. Represent to the fullest. And he says his name, his gang, he says Garden Block Crip. That's what he represents. I'm not a gangster, okay? But when you hear this song, when you're tougher than everyone else, when you're the top martial artist, okay, even by the time I was 17, which is a little bit after I was at Live Oak, I was way tougher, way more vicious than other people. My heart was broken. It sent me into a very potent and vicious, retaliatory cycle and state of mind. But sometimes I was calm and shaking things off, but that viciousness was in me, and it's in my story how it plays out, and how after that, basically nobody ever really gets the best of me after that. No one really got the best of me there. They had done the mind control, and there's some incident occurred at Live Oak, and it filled me with a lot of hatred at the same time that my heart was broken. A lot of hatred and righteous indignation, what have you. And certainly righteous indignation was the driving force. So when, just picture like this, picture the toughest Crips you can see and think of in your life coming out of a Cadillac, all 4 of them strapped, and they walk up and they just shoot the hell out of somebody, right? Okay, much more vicious than any of these guys these days can do. That's basically what they would contend with if they would mess with us, right? If they jumped us, especially they made it racial. Okay, there was an incident like that. Some guys came from Oakland, what have you. Like we would have at that point, okay, we would have killed them. Now, I'm not saying it to be tough or this, and this, but no matter who it is, we would have killed them because there's that line being held, right? It's not just being held in LA, it's being held in Houston, it's being held in, that Bloods and Crip line in Baltimore and New York. Like, this is something that we took very seriously. And some of the guys would have dropped off, but the other guys and the more vicious allies would have teamed up. And again, I don't think that violence is a good thing. I don't think senseless violence is a good thing. People should be righteous. Being righteous is better than being, some kind of, senseless knucklehead or something, and so on and so forth. So it's important you make that distinction. So, in the midst of that some of these black guys were kind of, more like regular citizens, right? And some of us took being a gangster very seriously, and of everybody, I took it being the most seriously. Even though the other guy had a brother from 7 Trees, none of my brothers were gang members, okay? But I took it, none of them were from some ghetto street gang. I took it to heart, right, more than everyone else, and there's other guys that would have taken it to heart, and it's just how it is. It's almost like it's the rules in America that black gangs kill the most people, and that they establish themselves that way. Hispanic gangs, say in Southern California, they establish themselves with numbers. Okay, it's kind of like the unspoken rule in America, and that goes back to spirits too. And I'm not so concerned with who's tougher than who. That's not why I'm saying this. I'm just telling it how it was, the reality of the situation. You could be in a school with 2,000 people, and the most vicious people are, 12 black guys that hang out together, and not all of them are even vicious per se. Maybe 3 or 4 of us were very vicious and very determined to maintain the image of a ruthless and violent gang member. And me, because I got my heart broken, how did a brain surgeon's son come to that conclusion? That goes back to these occult spirits. When you come at me with a white slave master spirit, even though I can see in you that, hey, you're somewhat of a cool white guy. We might be smoking weed together in a different situations. We might have end up at some kind of school party together. Like, I don't really hate them, but that spirit triggers that ancient war spirit, the Ancient of Days war spirit, top martial arts spirit. So I'm a very vicious killer who at that time did not know that I was Jesus. At that time, I didn't think of myself as someone that the whole world is depending on. But I did think that if people didn't listen to me, that they would be in a world of shit and they wouldn't do God justice. I definitely thought that. And so when I got my heart broken, and this white chick in her own kind of sarcastic spirit, she was standing next to Maria, and she was a short white chick with blonde hair, and she kind of smirks at me like, what are you doing? Kind of like, what are you doing? Like, well, who does that? Like, I can't explain it, that really fueled the hatred. Here I am, a brain surgeon son. My social status is very much above everyone in that school, including Alex. His parents were richer than mine, but my dad's a brain surgeon, and that hits hard. That hits real hard when it comes to social status. People are like, whoa, versus, hey, you're another rich white kid, And so for them to try to play me out like a fucking schmuck, okay, for them to play me out like I'm not important, like Master P said, it's like when you're black, you're quote unquote just beat. Like, they look at you like you ain't shit. Listen to Master P song Black and White, right? He said, they start off the thing saying, check this out, Bobby, I got a joke. You want to hear it? What do you call a black doctor running through Central Park in a t-shirt, a baseball hat, and jeans or something, or sweats or something? And he says, N-word, okay? And notice they use the term doctor. So, to describe, hey, they don't care if he's a doctor. So that idea before I heard that song was already making my blood boil. But it wasn't like something I lived with every day full of extreme hate. It was in my subconscious, and it would kind of flare up here and there with different situations, right? So mixed in that heartbreak and that desire to show everybody that I'm the most serious warrior on the planet, most serious gangster, and that's how I identified at that time, was that kind of unfairness in society. That you got rejected because she did not recognize your worth or your dad's. Okay, that's why she didn't want to give you a chance. And her dad, who is nowhere near the same social status as your dad, okay, didn't want her talking to a black guy. Didn't want to make an exception of don't talk to any guys because they're your last boyfriend with a brain surgeon's son who's a humanitarian. And it's how it's structured. It's how people think. It's how they relate to each other. It's their culture. It's their philosophy. It's their mentality. And it's ugly. It's very ugly, very evil. And I was very serious about being a Christian, but I didn't read the Bible that much, and I knew that there's problems that are straightforward and that people don't understand turning the other cheek, but they do understand, having a revolver in their face. They don't understand a pistol in their face. They don't understand a shotgun right to their fucking, dome. They understand that very well. And we live in a society that we've never reconciled slavery. They never stopped being bitches in regards to social status and race relations. We've never reconciled that. And I'm biracial, right? There's some people don't like me because I'm part white and they're black. But it is a racist society. Morgan Hill isn't the most racist place. I can't stress that enough. It might even be among the least racist cities in America. Don't know. But it's still there, And to some degree, I feel some kind of relief and pleasure. And it's not necessarily a good thing, not just a bad. When I say that, yeah, we would have killed them. You know what I'm saying? That I'm tougher than them. And that is a result of that animosity that they injected into me. Like that documentary about gangbang made in America. See, every day there's a spoonful of hate, but it's not as simple as it was hate, right? There's also confusion and heartbreak. There's also boredom in school, right? The board of education. There's a bunch of things that come together. And every once in a while that hatred flares up, when I was younger because of, all this stuff. Then they sent me to reform school. You believe after all that fucking shit, and keep in mind, I never, I didn't do anything. I got sent to reform school for like leaving the house without telling my parents, for smoking weed, for them, having their views about how I should think and trying to team up with mental health again, for fucking dumb fucking white social norm bullshit. Not for like, oh, he's schizophrenic or he's bipolar. I don't got none of that bullshit. It's because they say, hey, if you're not going to do what we say, then we're going to fucking punish you one way or another. With pills, with reform school, with fucking people badgering you, right? Badge and badger. That's what the fuck they did. And I'm not saying every cop is the devil or something, but it's the design of the fucking system. They don't love God. They don't love me. They're fucking evil. Okay? And Marissa got killed first and foremost because the governing class is evil and your society kisses their fucking ass and they accept their evil spirit. And it lashed out, it took form in that moment when she got stabbed 5 times in the fucking back. Like you've all stabbed me in the fucking back, metaphorically speaking. So let me just say this, I would have loved Maria Mello with all of my heart as the son of God. Some people might think this is all a racial issue, we must break into camps. That's immature. That is very, very immature. The spirit is everything, the flesh means nothing. I was engaged to a woman who's part Italian, part Greek, and she had a child who was a little girl who's white. And I would have loved that little girl like my own. And her name was Mary Kate, and that's not a coincidence. The word Kate is is similar to the word cat. And the word God spelled backwards is dog. And cheat is a play on word for see, he at, he cat, see heat, and seat, and also set, right? Because the C can have an S sound. Set A, set alpha. Who's cheating the cat? The dog like jackal, the fox like jackal, set. And people don't understand that. They don't understand that that is fucking unacceptable. It's intolerable. That's wrong. Over my fucking dead body. Not going to go along with it. I proudly, when I die after being screened out, proudly die for God Almighty. I proudly live for God Almighty. I would have loved her with every bit of my being. And her dad did not want to give me a chance to know her daughter. And her daughter came up with stupid, superficial bitch shit. If you don't want to give me a chance, make it clear and give me a good reason. Then years later, when I saw someone on Facebook who claimed to be her, they didn't want to respond to my message. The profile was put out there maybe by the government. You see the message read, she didn't respond. Years later, never fucking grew up, and I just wanted closure. Not foreclosure, right? Foreclosing on my parents' house after the government denies me my compensation. After years of fuming and poisoning me, they just play stupid. They play dumber than fucking the government's playing about the Epstein files and everything else that's going on. Okay, just unbelievable. Society never loved me a little bit. And in September, I would be 44 years old. Hopefully I'm not alive still then. Shunned by females, shunned by society. Haven't had a date since like 2018. Because everyone worships the fucking devil. 60% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. So I don't want to hear, it's because you're poor. Or did this fucking bullshit. There are more poor people in America than people in probably most countries in the fucking world. Than their general population. Than the general population of most countries in the fucking world. I can then turn around and say, it's been when I'm the top martial artist ever possible. I'm the most righteous person ever possible. All these females historically running their fucking mouths saying, you just want to fuck me to all kinds of guys? That's shallow, da-da-da-da-da, and some of them saying they being a gold digger shallow. Well, none of your gender had the fucking heart to choose me for my heart. To choose the heart of hearts instead of a path of a rape called piece of shit. You're fucking racist society, you're greedy society, you're petty society. You're superficial, shallow, artificial, senseless fucking society, senseless fucking planet. It screens out the righteous, and even your own book, Isaiah 57. Said the righteous are taken away. Before, during, and after that was written, it said the righteous are taken away from this planet. Why? Because you people are so fucking petty, and you break into your little groups and clans and tribes like some kind of clique in fucking junior high, some kind of immature bitches. You all need to grow the fuck up. Keyword up, not down.